Friends, it's my pleasure to introduce to you a fantastic musician. He's a multi-instrumentalist, phenomenal singer, and a great songwriter. As a world-class drummer, I will tell you, he has one of the tightest pockets in the business. Most notably, he was Sting's drummer for 3 years, whom he recorded with and toured many times the world over. Moreover, he's the frontman, principal songwriter, and producer of his own band, Zach Jones and the Tricky Bits, an awesome New York City-based power pop group, reminiscent in the throwback of Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers and Squeeze, with strong hooks, catchy melodies, and song lyrics focusing on life and death and the deeper contemporary social issues we all face in the current time today. Best of all, he's one hell of a cool dude. Please welcome Zach Jones.
Thank you, dude. I'll
Zach.
That. I appreciate that.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah.
I really do. I went to see that awesome show. It was the second one at the Bitter End on May 17th. And with you playing on the guitar. Mm-hmm. And I have to say, the band sounded great. It sounded really better than ever. I said to you before. Yeah, it was great. But, I was reading something really funny just earlier today I wanted to bring up. I was reading that Sting told the audience you were Stewart Copeland's son.
Yes. Yes.
And he said that this is a family band.
Yep.
Because I think Dominic had his son playing with him.
Yeah, Rufus.
And then Joe Sumner was opening for Sting in one of the shows. It had to be like maybe in 2021 or something.
Yep.
That's
right.
So, how did that gag come about? Did he just decide to do it like that day or something?
Yeah, he just sort of said it on stage one night, and then it became sort of a running gag. But he stopped doing it when people didn't realize it was a joke, and I kept getting people coming up to me going, "How's your dad?" Like,
oh shit,
he's good, but he's not who you think he is. So. People didn't really get that it was a bit, but I guess, we both wear like thick glasses and, have blonde hair. So it's close enough that people thought he was being serious.
And I think you bleach your hair even more blonde when you do these shows, don't you?
Yeah. Well, I've been doing that for a little while, but yeah, it's definitely, the police were one of the reasons I wanted the blonde hair in the first place.
Yeah.
So.
No, it works really well. And it's like a throwback.
Yeah.
And I saw how blonde it was because you were doing a short bit with Modern Drummer, and you explaining the kit.
Yeah.
And it was really blonde in that video.
Yeah.
More blonde than I've ever seen it.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. How old were you when you began playing? Let's just take it way back. And what was the first instrument that you played?
I was, I think the first instrument I tried to play was guitar, and my dad's a really great guitar player, and he sort of tried to get me started, and I didn't really take to it. And then same thing with piano. I tried, and I didn't really take to it. And I did play clarinet for a little while, like in school band. But drum set was the first thing. Like, as soon as I sat down, I couldn't play right away, obviously, but I felt like connected to it and excited to figure it out.
Who are the bands and artists who were your biggest influences when you were growing up?
Growing up, the Beatles were like my first and still the biggest for me. I just, and actually solo McCartney was like the first thing that I really fell in love with. And I got into the Beatles through that.
Interesting.
And then, it was a lot of my dad's favorite stuff. So a lot of like 60s and 70s rock bands like the Monkees and the Stones, Zeppelin, Cream. That was kind of some of my favorite early stuff.
Oh man, that's how I cut my teeth. Yeah.
Yeah. Learning how to play drums. It was a lot of the great, drummers in bands of that era. And then like lots of 60s and 70s, like soul and R&B records, like anything that Bernard Purdy's on or Stax and Motown. I love all that stuff.
Yeah. Wow. I
Yeah.
mean, you're really lucky, dude, to have a father who
Yeah.
exposed you to the old stuff, being,
Amen.
in your age bracket. A lot of people, musicians, won't necessarily go back to that early stuff.
Yeah.
But I think it's because of your dad. And that brings me up to my next question. Since you've grew up in a musical family, I know that not only your dad is a great guitar player and frontman, your grandfather was a horn player, wasn't he?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And then I was reading that your sister as well, is a musician, and that you kind of like were in a theater troupe when you were growing up called
Yes.
Our Gang.
Yep. Yeah. Our gang players was a community theater group that was founded a long time before I joined it, but
Yeah.
in the South Jersey area. And yeah, my parents got me into that when I was like 7 or 8, and to perform in the plays. And then my sister started doing it a couple years later, and my sister's a little younger than me. And my mom and dad, my dad got involved with like playing in the pit or doing set construction, and my mom would be out at the box office. And so it did become like a full family affair. There were quite a few shows.
That was the real family band.
Yeah, it was cool. Yeah, it was a fun thing for us to do together, and it was cool.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So you were already playing drums by 7 or 8?
No, I started drums when I was 9. So I started like performing like as an actor, kid actor in the plays first. And then I started playing drums when I was 9. And then within a couple years, that kind of took over. I wasn't on stage as much. I was in the orchestra pit, or I started a band with some of my friends from the community theater group. And so that kind of became more my, what I was excited about.
Got it. Were you taking lessons from an early age on drums, or did that come later?
That came later. I kind of learned like my dad showed me some stuff. I picked up a lot by ear, just playing along to records, and friends of his would show me stuff. And then I didn't have like formal training until I think I was 14 when I took my first like real lessons. That was in New York. So yeah, I guess I've been playing about 5 years when I started taking some real lessons.
Now, when you were learning early on, were you copying records, like listening to drummers and like trying to cop them off the record, so to speak?
Yeah.
That's the best.
Yeah. Yeah. That was like, Ringo and, Hal Blaine. And I mean, it was unbeknownst to me, it was a lot of the great session drummers, because that's who played on those records from the 60s and 70s. But I didn't know who it was a lot of the time, but I loved the playing. So yeah, I would just try to sort of listen and pick up what they were doing and play along.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's missing today with young people, because they depend too much on YouTube and they do it visually instead of developing their ear. But you did it old school way because of your dad and your family, I believe.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I didn't have access. I mean, I had the resource of my dad and friends of his and stuff, but it was largely like you would just have to listen and figure it out. And sometimes there was a mystery about, like Come Together or, certain things like that. I didn't know how Ringo was doing that. I just had to kind of make up my own version of it and then figure it out later.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I used to like wear out Di Meola records, Al Di Meola, just trying to cop things. But that's the best way to cut your teeth, really, Yeah,
and I mean, and it's fun to look at like my dad's record collection. You can tell the records that he really practiced along to, because they're just completely scratched up, and like his copy of Zeppelin 2 is like a mess, because he just kept pulling the needle back to try to figure out the guitar parts.
Led Zeppelin, that was my first concert.
Oh, cool.
1977, man.
Where did you see him? Oh, cool.
I went to see him in the Garden, yeah.
Yeah.
June 10th, 1977. Before
So
my family took me to Europe, it was
nice.
incredible.
Are you
What a first!
from Are you from New York? Did you grow up here?
I was actually born in Hawaii.
Uh huh.
Yeah, but I've been living here for a long time. So
Cool. Cool.
yeah. Now you're originally from New Jersey, like near the
Yes,
Long Beach Island area,
that's right. Yep.
right? That's interesting. Now, did you start playing in local clubs in New Jersey, like Jersey Shore bands, before you moved to New York City?
Totally. Yep. Yeah, and there was also a theater on Long Beach Island called the Surflight Theater. That was like a summer stock place. So I
Hmm.
played musicals there, and then my band played a lot of the shore bars and stuff. And in fact, there's a few bars on LBI where my granddad and my dad and me all have played gigs. So that's kind of fun.
Was that early band that you had a cover band back in those
Yeah,
days?
we started playing covers, and then a couple of the guys in that band started writing their own songs.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't start writing until way later, but
Got it.
I always enjoyed when, like, the process of when they would bring in songs and we'd learn them and make up parts, and I always loved that.
What was the name of that band?
That was the Sly Caps.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was reading also, you were on an MTV thing like 20
Yep.
years ago with the Sly
Yep.
Caps. That was the
Yep.
same band.
That was the same band. That was a show called Made on MTV in 2003.
Wow. So
Yeah.
you were like a kid back then, like a teenager, I
Yeah,
suppose.
I mean, I was like 15, I think, when we
All
filmed
right.
that, and I was probably 16 by the time it came out.
Got it. How did you end up getting on that show? Do you remember?
Yeah, that was the show was brand new. They hadn't even done the first season. We were in the first season, so when they were sort of scouting for people, they came to our high school. Since we're not, I didn't grow up that far from New York, maybe like hour and a half, 2 hours away. So they
Hmm.
came to our high school and they were looking for like people who wanted to be like surfers or lifeguards or whatever. And
Oh, so cool.
because it was about like teenagers kind of achieving their dreams basically. And they were very specific about, we don't want bands, we don't want music. Don't come talk to us if you're a musician. And my friend Matt Fisher, who was one of the writers, singers, guitarists in that band, to his credit, he went down and was like, "Here, I have my band's demo." And they were like, "We don't want bands." And he was like, "Well, then it'll sit in your car instead of mine, you know?" And so they took the CD, and then a few months later, they called us, or they called him, and they said, "We want to come and meet you guys." And we did like pre-interview stuff, and then they liked it, and they decided to make the episode with us.
Oh, that's great. Were you
Yeah.
doing more originals with the band back then or more covers?
But by then we were doing more originals. Yeah, Matt was and is a very prolific writer,
Hmm.
and then my friend Justin Bohr, who was the other guitarist, he wrote a few tunes, and our bass player John McElroy wrote a few tunes, and so it was probably a little more than 50% originals. We still did a lot of covers when we played gigs, but
Do you still see those guys or you ever jam
yeah,
with them?
yeah, I do. I do. I see Justin and Matt a lot. I just saw John for the first time in a while, and everyone's still in music in one way or another, playing or on the kind of business side or whatever.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
What year did you move to Brooklyn? And why did you decide to move there?
Well, I moved to New York in I actually moved to Astoria, Queens first, and that was in '05. That was after I graduated high school,
Hmm.
and I moved here. I was going to a place called the Drummers Collective for college essentially, but it wasn't college. But post high school education, I went to this place called the Drummers Collective. So, and I lived with a family friend in Queens while I went there, and that school was kind of near Union Square, like Sixth Avenue,
Yeah.
and so I did that for about a year. And why was I I wanted to go to that school, but really I just wanted to live in New York, and that was kind of an excuse to come live up here and feel it out, and get a vibe for the city. And then I left for a couple years because being under 21, I couldn't really go to like clubs and like meet other musicians and do the stuff that you need to do to kind of get in the scene.
Yeah. So you moved back to Jersey?
Yeah, I was back in Jersey for a minute. I'm doing like bar gigs and working at the theater. And then I did a musical theater tour for about a year. And then after that, I moved back to the city. And then I was in Manhattan for a little while. Then I've been in Brooklyn since like maybe like 2009, something like that.
Right.
I lived in Williamsburg for 10 years.
Did you, when you moved to Astoria that first year, did you gig in New York City?
A little bit. Mostly, though, with my band from South Jersey. They would come up and we would play bars and stuff. We actually always... We would come up and play shows up here once in a while. We went to Philly a few times. We played in Asbury Park a lot, like Stone Pony, places like that. Yeah. And we did a couple little tours as well.
What places did you play in Manhattan when you were here that first year, or in Brooklyn or Queens?
I got to play CBGB a few times with that band, which was really cool when that was still around. Yeah. And we played the main room a couple times, and we played the gallery, I think, once or twice. We used to play Arlene's Grocery. We used to play the Continental. We played there a couple times.
Rockwood Hall?
Rockwood Music Hall was that was a little later. That was like when I kind of after I moved to Brooklyn. I like kind of lived there for like 10 years. Yeah. All the time.
You had to be playing CBGBs when it was like near the end, because
yes, had probably to be in the last few years that they
because I was playing there in 2000 and 2001.
Okay,
but I originally played there back in 1980 when I was a kid.
Yeah. My buddy Martin Rivas, who is a great singer and songwriter in our community, he played there a lot in the 90s with his band. Yeah. And then I was there more like probably 03 through like 05 or 6.
But in 03 you were still in Jersey, living in Jersey.
Yeah, right? I was still in high school, but we would come up and play some shows.
Oh, great. Yeah. Do you play jazz, by the way? Did you study jazz when you were growing up?
No, not really. I mean, no? I always liked like big band swing, which was mostly because of my grandfather. That's what he loved, was Count Basie and Glenn Miller and like that era. I like listening to jazz, some of it, and I feel like I can kind of get by and groove, but I definitely am not a jazz player.
Right. Yeah. Did you listen to fusion when you were growing up?
A little bit. I mean, that was kind of like around the same time I got into the Police, because I was kind of like wanting to challenge myself on drums. And so I got, Stewart Copeland was kind of the same time for me as like Dave Weckl or Dennis Chambers or some of those drummers. I never loved fusion music, but I was into the playing. Yeah, me too. And it was definitely good for me to learn some of that stuff.
Did you like listen to Tony Williams and cats like Alphonse Mouzon?
I love their playing when I hear it, and I have a ton of respect, but I never was like, no, not really. Like rock and roll guy. Really.
I love it.
I mean, I love like, I'm more like a songs guy, really more than anything.
Right. And that's why you've developed into the way you have, because, you're always about the song.
Yes.
And when you play drums, your musicality is about the song. You never overplay, which I really respect.
Thanks.
And, you play to serve the song.
Yeah. That's what it's about for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's always been that way. So, it's just like ingrained in you over the years. Yeah. But I want to get back to like more granular stuff with that a little later.
Sure.
But let's talk about the Brooklyn music scene.
Uh-huh.
Tell me how and when you first got immersed into it. And how do you think that getting immersed into the Brooklyn music scene and contributed to your career?
Well, it's funny. I don't know. I don't know how much I feel connected to like a Brooklyn music scene per se. My whole community was more based around Rockwood, around Lower East Side. I mean, nobody lived there. No one lived on the Lower East Side.
Yeah.
Most of us didn't live in Manhattan. We lived in Brooklyn or Queens or whatever. But that was kind of the nexus of like everything I was doing, from probably like 2010 until really up until the pandemic. That was kind of when, for obvious reasons, we didn't play there for a while, and then they've had their struggles. But that was more like where I would say kind of what my community was, you know.
Yeah. When did Brooklyn become a big thing for musicians? Like it became like an it thing.
Before I got there, I mean, you know, I think probably, have you read that Meet Me in the Bathroom, that book?
No, I haven't, but
it's great. It's great. And I think they either did or they're going to turn it into a documentary too. But that's a really good recounting of like the kind of like late 90s through the early 2000s, like Strokes and that scene. And it kind of ends with like some of the like mid 2000s Brooklyn bands. I'm totally blanking on the name of the guys I'm trying to. Kip Malone, Tivy on the Radio, like those kind of bands. I feel like that was before I got there. Those bands were doing their thing, and Williamsburg was kind of blowing up. You know, that had already happened by the time I showed up.
Yeah, I'm really fascinated by this because, you know, I'm older and I kind of missed that. And so maybe like around 95 or 96, I started getting the feeling that Brooklyn was like getting like hot for music, for like local musicians and so forth. You know, that's when, you know, that whole area began. Well, even it became gentrified even before that. But I mean, it started really, you know, getting bigger with local musicians. And I think that's what you're talking about. That period from 95 to 2002 or so. I was actually doing. Go ahead.
People started moving out this way because they could afford to live out here, and people were living in those big lofts and stuff, and you know, lots of like many people crashing in a big loft that was not zoned for people to live in, you know. And I mean, and that's always the cycle, right? It's like the artists move to the place where they can afford to live, and then that becomes the place, and then they can't afford to live there anymore. And I mean, I feel like I moved to Williamsburg, like it was definitely already happening, but it hadn't really crested yet in terms of like affordability and being cool. And by the time I left, I feel like it was pretty much over the hill of like, there's a Starbucks. It feels like mostly very wealthy people who live there now. It's definitely a different thing than when I lived there.
And that was like by 2006, it was already becoming gentrified.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I moved there in like 2009, and I was there for 10 years. I definitely saw a change. You know.
From 2005, big change.
Yeah, I mean, it was already. I got lucky. My roommate and I got lucky with our place that we could afford to live there at all, and it was already pricey when we moved out there. And by the time we left, it was like, no way. We got, you know.
Where are you living now, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm down like Park Slope area.
Oh, cool. Like 7th Avenue?
Yeah.
In that area? That's great. That's a great area. I go there often, you know, for different reasons. Your Spotify reads, Zach has been a vital member of Brooklyn's songwriter scene for the past decade. Can you explain to my viewers what is the essence of what the Brooklyn songwriter scene is?
You know, I asked my friend Jesse Kristen wrote that bio for me. Jesse's the drummer in Jukebox the Ghost. Great band and great friends of mine. And Yeah, I felt uncomfortable writing my own thing, and I sent him the Plastic Soul record before it came out, and I said, "Can you just write something?" And he wrote a very eloquent, very sweet thing.
Yeah, it's really well written.
Yeah, yeah,
And it made
and
me question things.
what's that?
It made me question things.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, I mean, I guess if there's a Brooklyn songwriter scene, it's like probably I guess a lot of the people like again that I was playing with at Rockwood were living out in Brooklyn in actuality, but we would go into the Lower East Side to play. And then I mean I definitely played out in Brooklyn a bunch too. And then Oscar, my production partner, and I, who's in the Tricky Bits, Oscar Alves Rodriguez, he and I always, like when we were doing recording projects, that was always in Brooklyn. We were in Greenpoint. Well, we still are in Greenpoint, but we were at a different studio. So yeah, I feel like we've always been kind of based in Brooklyn, even when the gigs were in Manhattan for many years.
Right. When did you meet your partner, Oscar?
I met Oscar through a band called A Great Big World that we both played in for a while.
Yeah.
The song Say Something was became a big hit right after Oscar joined the band. That sort of took off, and it was like Beatlemania for a little while. It was really wild. But yeah, Oscar was like a friend of a friend, and he came in and auditioned for that band on guitar, and I met him at the audition, and it was like totally. Even his vibe when he walked in, I was like, "This guy's cool," and
instant synergy.
Totally. I mean, yeah. And then from the first time he played, it was just like, this is definitely the right guy for the band. And then he and I really on tour, spending many hours. You know, I mean, I remember the first time we hung out was like he came on and picked me up because we were going to drive to Philly for a gig. And so we had a couple hours in his car to basically meet each other, get to know each other. And we always had an easy time speaking very personally. You know, like we've always been great friends. And also we just love all the same music. And we really connected over like the Beatles and Big Star and Tom Petty and a lot of the stuff that became the influence for the Tricky Bits was like just stuff that we liked talking about and listening to.
That's awesome. Yeah. What year was that you met Oscar?
Probably 2014, something like that, maybe 13. I don't remember, honestly.
Right.
It's probably been about 10 years.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
He's a great guitar player. He plays so for the song. You know,
so great. And I mean, a great bass player too, a great keyboard player, a great songwriter in his own right. And yeah, I mean, the first thing we did recording was my first EP, the first Tricky Bits EP, and we recorded
Rendezvous with the Comet.
That's it. And we recorded that over like a year or something, or 2 years. It took us a while.
Yeah.
But that was just us kind of chipping away at those 4 songs. And that was our first time working in the studio together. And we kind of realized, like, we love to do this. We have a really good rapport. And then we wanted to start doing it with other artists too. And we sort of offered ourselves up as a production team. And we've been doing that ever since, in addition to working on my stuff still and his stuff together.
Got it. Yeah, I want to go back to that Rendezvous with the Comet, but because I'm really intrigued by the slope of the trajectory of it. But I want to go back a little further here. You were in Secret Someones, I think, from 2013 through 2016.
Yep.
And you were signed to Cherry Tree Records at the time. How'd you get into that band? And I think you were the only guy in the band or something like that.
Yep. I mean, that band started as, again, talk about Brooklyn songwriter scene. But really we all met kind of through Rockwood and whatever. But that was three separate singer-songwriters. That was Bess Rogers, Hannah Winkler, Lilia Broussard. They were all doing their own solo stuff. And I was playing drums with each of them when they did solo gigs, and then they decided to do a house concert tour together, and asked me to come play drums for all three of them. And it was kind of during the course of that tour, playing each other's music, we realized we really liked playing together. They had a really great blend on vocal harmonies. And well, I think when we got right when we got back from that tour, I think they started getting together to write original material as a group. And then it just kind of became a band that way.
Interesting. So you were doing tours with them separately for each of the three musicians did their own tour.
Yeah.
And you were their drummer.
I was doing like local gigs with all of them around New York. I don't think I had done any touring with any of them at that point. But then the four of us did like a house concert tour, playing all of their solo songs. And then after that, they started writing together, and it just kind of evolved into a band.
Can you tell listeners and viewers what a house concert tour exactly is?
That's where you just reach out to people who are fans around the U.S. in our case, and you say, "Does anybody want to host us to do a show?" And enough people
in their house.
Yeah, in their house or in their. We did a show at a hair salon. We did, any kind of space that you have that you want to host a show.
Yeah.
And yeah, sometimes they would put us up, sometimes not, but we just kind of drove around the US and played people's houses. It's a really great way to do gigs, and it's a cool environment. You actually get to meet the people you're playing for. And oftentimes it feels like they're more invested than going to some random rock club in Buffalo or whatever. You play somebody's house and you really kind of I feel like you make real fans that way, which is cool.
I never knew this was a thing.
Yeah.
When did this first start becoming a thing with musicians?
I don't know. I mean, I've known people who've done it my whole life, but for us, it was I guess, a year or two before we started that band formally, I guess.
Yeah.
That was my first time doing a tour where we played only house concerts, but it was cool.
I wouldn't even think of that.
And it was a cool way for that band to form, because it was so based on, it really highlights the songwriting, and it really highlights the vocal harmony stuff, and because you're playing kind of acoustic gigs.
Yeah. So I would think it'd be a small kit that you bring there.
Yeah.
And it's acoustic and more vocal harmonies, right? It's stripped down. You're not bringing very much amplification, if any.
Yeah, I was playing a kick and a snare with brushes and acoustic guitars, maybe a small guitar amp, but that was kind of the vibe.
Right. And when you would book these tours for these house gigs, they would say I'm guessing again, East Coast, say New York, Philly, maybe down to North Carolina or something.
Yep, exactly.
And maybe you'd string together 10 dates over a period of a few weeks or so.
That's it.
It wouldn't be anything radical, East Coast to West Coast, anything like that, or to Chicago and back. No,
I mean, I can't remember exactly specifically with the house concerts, how far we went, but there's some people our friends, the Heist family they're in North Carolina. They do a proper, they have it's called backyard stage. They have a stage set up. They have it's like a gig. And then sometimes it's just literally we're going to move the couch and you guys go in the corner. So we did kind of any iteration of that, and it was always really fun.
That sounds like a blast, man.
It was. And I mean, it was a great way for us to all just connect and become friends and listen to records in the van and talk about what kind of stuff we wanted to play. And so the band formed very naturally out of that.
Yeah.
Just hours on the road and listening to music.
So how do you even book those house gigs? Is it you start with your mailing list and you see who's the most fervent fans? Yeah,
I mean that's the fact that they had done the legwork of touring for many years prior to that,
Hmm.
and had enough of a fan base in certain cities where, yeah, you can just reach out to your mailing list, or I guess at that point it would have been Facebook. You know, we could just put out a call and be like, hey, you know, if you're between this city and you want to host a show between these dates, let
Yeah.
us know. And you
Right.
get, you know, you don't need many people to be interested to put something together.
Right. So maybe you send out a blast of, say, your 300 fans in this area,
Right.
and then even if you get like 2% that respond,
Totally.
that's like maybe, I don't know, a couple of gigs right there,
Yeah, and I mean,
that you have.
the nice thing too is then most of the time, you know that when you roll into town, you're going to play a show and that you're actually going to see some people. They're actually going to listen. Whereas, you know, you book a show at a rock club and you're like just kind of crossing your fingers that anyone's going to show up.
Yeah.
And maybe you're opening for somebody local and their fans don't really pay attention, or so it was
So many
like
factors.
it was a nice way to actually feel like the time we were spending on the road was adding up to something, because people were really engaging with the music.
Right. And you have captive fans when you're
Exactly.
doing a house gig.
Yeah.
And they're a attentive audience, and they want you there rather than,
Yeah. Yeah.
being a slave to another band's following, like
Which
you
can
said.
be really cool. You know, like I've gotten to actually with Secret Someones, and then I've gotten a few times with my stuff to open for Jukebox the Ghost, who I mentioned before.
Hmm.
And they like really have like the best fans, truly. Like, and I think a lot of their fans found them because they were opening for somebody else. So I mean, their audience always comes early and they really listen to the opener. So sometimes you get lucky with a band like that, and it feels like opening is actually worth your time.
But that's not
Sometimes
usually
you
the
don't.
case. Usually
Yeah.
it's the opposite.
Yeah, that's rare. That's rare, and it's special, and it speaks to those guys because they've really cultivated that well.
It really amazes me, like how do you cultivate that type of devotion, to a
I know.
particular band. Some guys just have it. They just know how to do it, or maybe it just exudes off of them, and their fans love them.
Yeah, and I think also there's a trust thing of like Jukebox always books good openers. So if you're a fan of theirs, you can trust if you go there, you're going to see something good because they care about that. Some artists don't care about that. It's just like who's going to sell tickets, or who wants to buy on
Yeah.
to the tour or whatever. And those guys really are invested in making sure that it's a good show top to bottom.
Yeah, and they probably
So
take care of their fans too,
totally,
in different ways, directly and indirectly.
totally.
Whether it be with keeping in touch with them and giving
Yep.
them updates periodically, or maybe going above and beyond that, like maybe giving them something extra at a show, or maybe sending them something free, like a latest release. I don't know. You can think of like many different things.
Yeah, yeah.
Getting back to Secret Someones, this is the time when you, with Cherry Tree Records, I was reading,
Yep.
that you built and developed a relationship with Sting.
Yes.
And also other world-class acts. How did that happen, being involved with Secret Someones and Cherry Tree Records? How did that develop organically?
That was we got signed to Cherry Tree because Lilia Broussard, who was the bassist in the band, one of the singers, writers, her manager, like for her solo thing, liked Secret Someones and had a connection with Martin Kiersbaum, who is the head of Cherry Tree Records. So we got signed to Cherry Tree, and I remember like very early on kind of connecting with Martin because I knew he worked with Sting, and Sting was on Cherry Tree. They had a relationship for many years.
Mm-hmm.
And so I mean, it must have been one of our first conversations. I was just like, man, I'm a huge fan of his, and I thought at the time, I thought maybe I'll get to meet him at some point, Sting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and Martin is a guy who really likes to get his artists working together, and I just was a beneficiary of that. He saw an opportunity like pretty early on in our relationship. He called me in for a session with Sting, and that was the first time I met him was like 2 minutes before we started playing together.
That in itself is a dream, just to be called in for a session.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Had to be nerve-wracking, dude. In the beginning, it
was, but I also felt like, I don't know. I'm such a fan of his, and I felt like I can do this. I know this guy. I know this music. You know, it was nerve-wracking, but also I met him and we were playing music together within minutes, and that was the best thing that could have happened.
You didn't have any time to think about anything.
Yeah, and we weren't like the kind of awkwardness of like we're having lunch or something, like, and we have to. I don't want to be like a fanboy and whatever. All that stuff you have to negotiate. I just got to start playing music, and we connected on that level first, which was really good, and that helped me kind of chill around him, like as a guy, you know. And
what was the first song that you played with Sting?
It was Next to You or Message in Bottle or one of the, like, it was a Police tune for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what year was that you played the first session with Sting?
That was probably for 2014 or 15.
Okay.
And then, and then after that, they just called me periodically for sessions, or I did like the Tonight Show with him. I did the NBA All-Star Game with him. I did just kind of little stuff here and there for a long time.
But that Tonight Show was much later. That was like right before you joined his touring band. Or what I'm getting it. I think I'm getting it confused with the Stephen Colbert Show.
Yes, Colbert was right before I joined the touring band. That was like late 21.
Yeah.
But I did the Tonight Show with him in, I think, 2016 with this artist named Mylène Farmer, who's a French pop star. So that was, I mean, that's kind of how far the one-off stuff went back. And then, they called me to sub a gig toward the end of 2021. Mm-hmm. And then after that was when I got called for the tour.
Yeah. But by that time, you were doing periodical sessions with Sting between 2014 and 2021.
Something like that. Yeah, maybe 2015. But yeah, we had a few years of working relationship, rapport, you know. So by the time they called me for the tour, I had already played with him a bunch, and I knew him personally a little bit, you know, and so it wasn't like completely out of left field. It still felt out of left field, to be honest, to get offered the gig, you know, but yeah.
And how many sessions would you guess that you had done with Sting before you got called into the band?
I don't know. Maybe like 10, maybe less than that. I mean, I played on the record that he made with Shaggy. I played on the album, his solo album before that. I did the All-Star Game. We did like a handful of things together.
Yeah. Yeah. You were on 57th Street, I did see. That's the record.
I was on like the deluxe version of that record, and then I played on the Shaggy record on a couple tunes.
Wow. Because I remember I was just trying to figure the timeline in my head. Yeah. Because on the surface, you think, oh, he just got involved with Sting in 2021. No, not at all. No way. Because I had seen you in the background on the Howard Stern show.
Yeah.
Where Sting was talking about like how he got his name, Sting, and such. And you're just hanging out in the background. You know, this is like 2016, 2015.
Yeah, 2016 that was. And I was like, it's funny to see those clips now because it was so early in the morning. And I didn't realize I was like right behind him on camera the whole time.
You look like a deer in headlights, actually.
I know, I was a little zoned out.
Did he call you just to be in the cameo for that, like just to be in the background, or were you actually like doing sessions with him and he wanted you to play something?
I was doing things on and off with him at that point. I mean, on that interview, we played a bunch of songs. I was playing cajon.
Okay.
And we did like a handful of songs on that interview. But the clips from that keep circulating, I feel like, of the interview itself. Yeah. But we did play a bunch of tunes, and that was right around when the 57th and 9th record came out. So it was promo stuff for that.
Right.
I think I was kind of like the local like New York guy for a little while. And so that was like New York promo. They called me up.
Oh, but that's really cool in itself, just to be the local New York guy.
Yeah.
What's your favorite Sting or Police song to play?
Oh, man. I always loved playing If I Ever Lose My Faith in You. I love that. You know what I mean? I just think that's such a great groove and a great song. I love playing Can't Stand Losing You. That's probably... That might still be my favorite Police song. I love that song so much.
Yeah.
And it's a really fun one to play.
Yeah, I always thought that Stewart had one of the best hi-hats in the business.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah. The greatest.
And the fact that he lived in Beirut for a number of years actually contributed to his musicality.
Yeah.
You know, he has so many diverse things going on with his playing naturally.
Totally. Well, he talks about how the kind of reggae influence of the Police's music, where the emphasis is on two, is really like, for him it was Lebanese music, because they also emphasized the second beat of the bar. And then so when he heard reggae, it was like it just kind of made sense, because he was used to that pulse from Lebanese music. Yeah,
I was fascinated. I'm sure you've watched it, the recent Rick Beato interview with Stewart.
Yeah, it was great.
That was great, you know. Yeah. And I also had seen someone else interview him a year before, because he ended up doing a project with Adrian Belew from King Crimson.
Right.
And he was actually in the front playing guitar and singing in that project.
Yeah.
And he was talking about, you know, his playing and like his relationship with Neil Peart.
Yep.
And that, like, they're really great friends, and that, like, he was pissed off because he used to be in the top 5. Now he's only in the top 10. So cool. You know, I love Stewart. I love that dynamic between him and Sting when they were in the Police, because it was always like brothers fighting, you know?
Totally. Yeah.
You know, and there was like a competitive, they loved each other, but there was a competitive thing there, and they were trying to one up each other all the time.
But, you know, that's one of the things that makes that music tick, you know, is that tension between the creative tension between those guys.
Right. But then Stewart now admits that Sting was the genius of the band, and that he was the songwriter, and that he's very grateful that he let them play with him for 5 albums, because 3 albums was the expected expiration date on it.
Right.
They expected that by the end of, Zenyatta Vendetta, it would be over. But then Sting hung around and did Ghost in the Machine and Synchronicity.
Yeah. I mean, certainly as a songwriter, he is the force of that band. But, you know, those records wouldn't be those records without Andy and Stewart. You know, the 3 of them together is such a special thing.
One of the most special, if not the most special in pop.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's just unlike anything else. And, you know, I mean, I'm such a, you know, I think if you don't have songs, you don't really have anything. But then there is something about the way that a great band plays together. When great arrangements, when unique arrangements are happening, it draws you in. And like, I love the way that those guys approach those songs. I love the way those songs were recorded. The production on those albums is so great. Hugh Padgham, and I mean, like, just great stuff.
And Hugh Padgham wasn't even the first producer. He came in the
Right.
Ghost in the Machine
I can't
record.
remember the first guy's name who did the first few records, but
Yeah.
I mean, it's such an example of the whole being greater than the sum of its parts. Like every band, it's like,
Hmm.
it would be easy to say, and people do say that, the Beatles, Ringo sucks, or the Beatles, would have been great without him, or, John and Paul wrote the songs, so they should get.
Hmm.
It's like, man, those would not be the same records or the same songs really without Ringo's approach, without George. George didn't write many songs, but he wrote some of the best. It's like there's no denying that the band is an entity unto itself. That's bigger than any of those guys.
Ringo was the perfect drummer for the Beatles.
Totally.
He played for the song. He served every song perfectly, like no other drummer could. I mean, forget so he wasn't a technical drummer.
Well, and the thing I always come back to is like, if John Lennon sat down and played "Ticket to Ride" for you, you would not play that drum part. You would not come up with that.
No.
If he played "In My Life" for you, you would not come up with like that. That creativity it's so special to Ringo. The fact that he heard those songs and that's what came out is like, and there's such signature critical parts of those recordings.
Yeah.
You can't undercut that
No
creativity.
way. Yeah. And Ringo, I've watched interviews with him recently, and even like some from like 3 or 4 years ago, he says, "I'm a band guy." And then I think Dan Rather interviewed him, and Dan Rather says, "But did you practice a lot?" He says, "No, I never practiced."
Yeah.
He says, "I would just like hang out with the band and listen."
Yeah.
And then he would just come up with these perfect parts.
Yep.
But then people misconstrued his talent and his gift, because then Quincy Jones would call him to the studio and expect that Ringo would play like a session drummer.
Right.
And that wasn't Ringo's thing,
No, it's not his thing.
And then unfortunately, because most people, and including Quincy Jones, doesn't understand Ringo's essence and his value, then he makes a snarky comment, "Oh yeah, those guys aren't real musicians, the Beatles."
Right.
You know, because he's looking at it from a very narrow perspective.
Yeah.
That the musician has to be a top session guy and get the thing in one take.
Right.
But Ringo's a band guy.
Yeah.
But no one could contribute to the Beatles what Ringo contributed, in my opinion.
And I mean, who cares that it took them 30 takes to get a rhythm track for a song? It's like it's great when they get there, and it's true. I mean, I have such admiration for the John Robinsons and the Greg Phillingainses of the world, and that's really what I aspire to be. Mm-hmm. That's what I kind of trained to become, is like a session guy who can walk in and hear the song once and make it happen. But it's beautiful to watch the Get Back documentary and watch the way that those four guys put a song together. It's like it's so special, and it's not like anything else.
Yeah, that was great. I sat through all three in practically one sitting.
Yeah.
And it was just like, I just love the collaborative process.
Yeah, they had a thing.
Yeah, and by that time, Paul had to take over. He was like running the band.
Yep.
Because John had his issues, and he was lazy, John. And, but then, like George felt resentful because he felt like Paul was taking over the band.
Yeah.
And you totally usurp, any of his creativity. Obviously.
I know, it's like that Ringo says, if it hadn't been for Paul, they probably wouldn't have made any records after Revolver.
After Rubber Soul.
Yeah. And Paul was the one who would say, "All right, guys, it's time to go into the studio."
Paul was like the disciplinary, like the
totally. Yeah.
Like the bad teacher, who had to like whip his students into getting something done.
Yeah, and it's easy to see how that could get annoying or whatever, but it is true. It's like they just wouldn't have They
Yeah.
wouldn't have made those records without all of them. You know, you need all of those energies to make that
Yeah.
thing happen. And like the Police, it's like that those things have an expiration date. It's just what it is. You can't really live like that forever, but if
Hmm.
you can harness it for a few albums
Yeah.
and make that tension work for you for a little while, of course it's going to explode, but it's kind of worth it in a way because you get these
Yeah.
incredible pieces of music out of it.
Yeah.
You know,
People are,
whereas a band like U2, I mean, they've stayed together for so long, and in order to do that, you have to make compromises and you have to learn how to live together in that way.
Mhm.
And so maybe the records aren't as amazing at a certain point. Maybe you don't, you know what I mean? Like there is a bit of a trade-off with that. I don't think it's necessarily natural for 3 or 4 people to be that like close and intense and also like famous, and there's all these things coming at you. I don't think that's meant to last for very long.
no. Bands are ephemeral, actually,
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah.
And people have this misguided notion that bands have to get along. They don't have to get along to
Right.
create great stuff. Look
Right.
at The Who.
Yeah, totally.
They're at each other's throats. You
Yeah.
know, Townsend, you know, and Daltrey. Daltrey punched Townsend out.
Yeah.
You know, it's very well documented and recorded.
Yeah.
You know, after Townsend hit him with his Les Paul.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and, you know, they still created like amazing stuff, you know, for like a 10-year period.
Yeah. Well, and it doesn't seem like Mick and Keith have gotten along very well.
No.
For a huge period of time, you know, but
Yeah.
they're
Mick says, they had asked him, what about Keith? Oh, he's a very unhappy person.
right.
I love that with a smile.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because Keith is always bad-mouthing Zeppelin, or he's bad-mouthing Hendrix, or bad-mouthing like these rock of Gibraltar icons.
Yeah.
You know, and always slighting them. Oh, Robert Plant. No, Jimmy Page is Zeppelin. That's it.
Yeah.
Nothing else to it.
Right.
But getting back to the Police, what made them so special is that each one of them was an incredible musician.
Totally.
But few people would know it other than musicians. Like you think about Andy Summers, great guitar player.
Great guitar player and unique, you know.
And he played with everyone by the time he was in the Police. He was like 10 years older than everyone else.
Yep. Well,
And you know, he studied classical for several years before he joined the Police. And you know, he played with the Animals.
Yep.
You name it.
The sound and the voicings and all of those choices are, you know, again, you put someone else in that role and you're not going to get the same thing.
Absolutely.
And that's also just the nature of a trio. It's like everyone has to be at the top of their game or it's not going to work.
Right.
You look at Cream or you look at the Hendrix Experience or Rush or, you know, any great 3-piece band. It's like you really have to, everyone's got to have it dialed.
Yeah. By the way, you know who Stewart's favorite drummer is?
Who?
Mitch
Ginger
Mitchell.
Baker?
Mitch Mitchell.
Oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah. I love Mitch.
Yeah, he's great because he's a jazz drummer or has a background to that. And, you know, I could see why Stewart would like him so much.
Yeah.
Wow. This is great, man. You said that you didn't think you were going to get back with Sting in the very foreseeable future. Did Sting, have a group meeting or a one-to-one with people in the band? Did he say that he was going to start fresh with a new band next door?
Yeah, I mean they're doing a trio thing now with it's Sting and Dominic, who's been with him for a long time, and a guy named Chris Moss, who is a great drummer and a really nice dude. I've interacted with him a little.
Yeah.
And there's Sting's like he always has to change things up. He always has to keep the creativity happening. And for him, that usually means playing with different people, playing, he's famously done many different things over the years, like a lute record or writing a musical or a symphony tour. And so I think it's just, for him to stay engaged and kind of keep the juices flowing, he likes to switch it up.
Right.
And I mean,
Makes sense.
From the time I got the gig, I knew this is going to last however long this lasts. I always tried to hold it very lightly and know that, he likes to switch things up. So that's all that happened is he just needed a change. And so he's doing this trio thing and it seems cool. They're doing like a whole tour this year. And so it's, the door is open. Like we have a good relationship and everything. It's just, our tour kind of ran its course, and it was a great run.
It was really miraculous that you lasted 3 years with Sting, considering how he likes to, vamp up his creative juices and work with different people. That was a more than a great run. That was an extraordinary run.
I agree. Yeah, we had a really good. I mean, it was a great band. It was the whole unit was really got along great. Was really dialed. Sounded really good. And I think I'm really proud of what we did, and I'm really thankful for the time we had together. And it's just a different season of life now, and I'm digging it. It's been feeling really good to be home. So
I bet
I'm not. I'm enjoying it for sure. It's all good.
But no matter what happens, it was a dream run with Sting.
Yeah, man.
Few in the world could ever say that they were in your shoes. That's something that, you could, hang on your mantle, so to speak.
Yeah.
But however, it's just natural. We're just human. When reality sinks in, you realize the dream gig is over, at least for now.
Yeah.
It's got to be kind of a letdown at some point. We're all human. But when those feelings pop up, how do you deal with them?
Oh man, I mean, well, for me, the perspective is always like, I just want to make music. I want my life to be spent making music, and that takes different shapes over time. Like there's bands I was like really invested in 10 years ago that I don't play with anymore. There's 10 years down the road, there's probably somebody I haven't met yet who's going to be really important in my life, whose music I love, and that's just kind of, I never could have predicted the run with Sting. There's a lot of things in my life and my career that I wouldn't have been able to tell you this, at this age, I'm going to do this thing. It's like, it's not how it works. So the way I deal with it is just reminding myself that this is what it is. And that gig's over for now. And so what's next? I feel really like him. I feel very energized by playing with new people, by doing new projects, by all that. So I've actually been feeling really excited lately to have the space and the time to make new records, do new gigs, meet new people, and be back in New York for a little while. I'm really enjoying it. And just excited to see what comes next. I've already had a couple doors open up that I never would have expected. Yeah. So that's just a life in music to me, is just like, you got to ride the waves.
You have to have the right perspective.
Yeah. And when it's a low time, you got to remind yourself not to be too low, because it's just what happens. And it's going to pick up. It's going to, I try to do my job well. I try to treat people well. And I think that, things tend to work out
your way. If you do well, it's all karma. If you treat others the way you want to be treated, then good things usually happen.
That's how I try to try to be.
Is his recording process the same way in terms of the workflow?
The recording process, like when I did the record he did with Shaggy, they were kind of writing while I came in for one day and they were in the writing process. So it was very like, everything was kind of happening at once. The tracks were getting made, the writing was happening, so it was very free flowing when I went in. And I think I played on a couple songs that didn't end up on the record, and then it was very much in process at that time.
Yeah, so it's a different process than the live recording, live rehearsal process.
Totally.
Yeah. Let's talk about Zach Jones and the Tricky Bits.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your EP, Rendezvous with the Comet.
Uh-huh.
What inspired that title?
The title is from Scientific American magazine.
Mm-hmm.
My friend Chris Kuffner was a subscriber, I think. Mm-hmm. And so there were always copies laying around the house.
Yeah.
And I would just flip through and see like titles of articles that I just thought sounded cool. And so I wrote down a bunch of them in my phone, and one of them was Rendezvous with the Comet. One of them was Are You a Hologram, which was the next EP I put out. And they feel like vaguely related to the subject matter to me, but mostly I think they just sound cool.
How were you inspired to write Mushroom Suit about the Infinity burial suit?
That was I saw a TED Talk about the Infinity burial suit, and it was right around the time I was a big Mad Men fan when that was on the air. And I remember the spoiler alert for Mad Men, but toward the end of the series, Betty Draper, Don's ex-wife, finds out that she has cancer. She's going to die. And she writes this. She's always had kind of an emotionally stunted relationship with her daughter. And she writes this letter to her daughter basically saying, I know I'm going to go. And when I do, I want this dress and I want this necklace and use this lipstick that's in my purse. And it's very like, it's kind of clinical, and it's really about, it's who her character is, which is like very concerned with presenting a certain way and kind of emotionless. So anyway, I was very struck by that, and I've always been struck by our kind of rituals around death and the way that we, viewings and stuff like that. So it was all those things kind of mixed up. And then I wrote it with my friend Jenny Owen Youngs, and she and I basically, I think we spent a whole day like talking about this stuff. And then the song came together very quickly. Once we kind of knew what we wanted to say. Yeah.
It's a really fun song, really catchy song.
Thanks.
One of the highlights of the Zach Jones and Tricky Bits shows.
Thank you.
Sure. I always look forward to it.
Thanks.
But it's funny that you mentioned that, because I was with my partner and we were watching, and she brought up something, and I thought about it also. Do you believe that you have a fascination with death or the process of near dying?
Sure.
Because you have several songs that focus on this subject and this imagery. Like, for instance, you have Mushroom Suit, which we spoke about, Judy's Going to Space.
Yep.
Sleep When You're Dead. 1 Foot in the Grave.
Funny. Yeah. That's funny.
Yeah. So I said, she said, I think this dude has a fascination with death.
Yeah.
So can you talk about that?
I have I don't know what the word would be, but I think it's
morbid curiosity.
Definitely a curiosity, and I think it's one of those things that it's inevitable and it's universal, and yet we don't really like to talk about it, or we get very uncomfortable talking about it. And for me, it's I want to be comfortable. It's going to come for me and for everyone I love. And
so you might as well like get comfortable with it.
I just want to have a level of comfort with the idea of it and with what it is, which is, it's a part of life, and none of us really know what happens, what that process is. Judy's Going to Space is to me just kind of about like it's all. I mean, the video that Sarah Gold made for it she kind of introduced these like reincarnation themes, which I didn't really think was in the song, but I guess subconsciously maybe I'm writing about that a little bit. Or to me, it's just I don't know. Reincarnation could be a thing. I don't know. I don't feel confident saying one way or another.
Yeah.
but it's something I do think about, and it's something I think it's easier to discuss and digest ideas like that when they're in a song. And I think there's a lot of songs about breakups. There's a lot of songs about, there's those themes that people return to over and over again in songwriting. And I certainly write about those things too. But to me, that's one of those areas that I'm like, there's not enough songs about this. And I think if I write some songs about this, maybe it makes it a little easier to talk about it. I mean, the song Mushroom Suit has inspired a lot of conversations with people in my real life. And that makes me feel great, that it's like, it just creates a space to think about that. And I don't like those songs to feel sad. I don't like them to feel depressing. I like them to feel,
and they're not.
And you know, so yeah, I think that's why I gravitate toward that. It's like trying to create some comfort around it and some.
And also, there's a level that you want to confront it.
Say it again.
You want to confront it because
of course.
It's something that most people are uncomfortable with.
Yes.
And, you have to just look it straight in the eye and say, we shouldn't feel uncomfortable talking about this, and let's have a conversation.
Yep. And songs are such a great way to do that.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, there's so many examples of people who it's a lot easier to sing things that that are harder to say, but
right.
So that's I think that's why I gravitate toward writing songs like that.
I really admire your courage, because the last song, or one of the last songs in your set on May 17th, The Bitter End, great again.
Yeah.
And you said, I don't know if I want to really go deeply into it, but then you said, yeah, let me do that. And you said, don't vote for Trump. Just let everyone get out and vote, even though Biden is not my favorite candidate, right?
Yeah.
Alternative is unthinkably horrible, and that was great. That summoned a lot of courage for you to say that. I said, I really admire this dude for saying this, and people did, because I could see there could be some real fanatical Trump heads out there that you might, step on their toes, or they may get irate.
Yeah.
But you did it anyway, so it's good for you. Is there any good argument that can be made why a new artist should make a full album in 2024 rather than producing and releasing singles, which are greatly more popular?
That's a great question. I think the argument is, if that's what you want to do, you should do it. I mean, I think in terms of, if you want to talk like business, or what makes sense on that side, I think it's like vinyl sales are a thing again. So if you have an LP, then you have a vinyl record to sell to people. You can't really do that. I don't think people buy 45s the way that they buy LPs. So purely on a selling merch sort of level, I guess it's good to have a full length. I think also music publications want to review albums. They don't want to review EPs or singles or whatever. But I think it's kind of, I think more than ever, maybe not more than ever, but more than in a long time in history, it's just kind of the Wild West. And I made the Plastic Soul album because I wanted to make a full length. That was really the only reason. I could have split that up into a couple EPs. I could have released singles. But I really wanted to make at least one full-length record, and making a full-length record made me write a few songs that I maybe wouldn't have written otherwise. There's a few songs on there that I wrote because I'm like, oh, I want this kind of a track, or I want this, I need this kind of a tempo to round out the record. And
Hmm.
so that was, for me, that was a cool part of the creative process. Um,
And the
but
creative process was much different for the full album Plastic Soul in 2022 than
it
it was for
was,
the EP
yes, it was.
Rendezvous with the Comet.
Yeah, yeah, it was. It was. I mean, yeah, most of my stuff up until that point had been more piecemeal, or it had been mostly me and Oscar, and then we would bring in the others like later on in the process. And the album, I really wanted to feel more like a band, from the beginning. I mean, a lot of that stuff is just practicality.
Hmm.
It's hard to do the old school thing and book out 2 weeks of studio time and get the whole band together. And it's a lot easier to do drums one day, and then 2 weeks later, when you have time, we'll do bass. And then it's
Yeah.
just it's for indie artists. I think it's just more practical. Um, but anyway, I think I don't know if there's any good reason to make an album other than
That you want to do it for your creative
yeah,
thirst.
yeah. I don't know if there's any good reason to make music. It's
That's
like
true. If you think about it, like, what are we
yeah,
making music for other than for the love of it right now?
that's it.
There's
If
no money in sales.
yeah,
Like, there are less gigs. If
I
you
think
think about it.
for me, it's always about when I sit down to write a song or make a record or whatever for myself. I think,
Hmm.
do I have anything to say?
Right.
And then if I do, then I say it. And if I don't, then I don't. And that's kind of, and in this case, I felt like the thing I had to say was a full length album. I wanted to express some stuff over a longer span of time. Sometimes I can say the thing I want to say with one tune.
Hmm.
Um, so anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I really couldn't have said it better myself
Hmm.
because we do it for our own creativity to satiate what we
Yeah.
have, to show our creation to the world and have something that we're proud of.
Yeah.
Just like you mentioned in your gigs, like, I'm really proud of Plastic Soul
Yeah.
because there was a much wider contribution to this record. You
Yes.
were able, through practicality, doing the drums one day, then doing like the guitar maybe next week. You were able to get many more great musicians involved with Plastic Soul.
Yeah.
And it was more of a collaborative effort,
Yes.
as you've
Well, and
mentioned.
I mean, that's one of the reasons I'm proud of that record is because it captures so many people who are important in my life and in my musical life.
Hmm.
Um, again, coming back to the thing of death, it's like I don't think about like legacy or whatever. But I
Hmm.
do think I'm proud that there are these records of these moments in time. That those people are all on a record together who are like really important to me, and that feels really good, and that makes it feel better than if I had just made the whole thing myself. To know that
Yeah.
all of these great people who I love have like a piece of themselves in the record.
Hmm.
Um, and I mean, even like with like Oscar's such a good example on these records of like I love just getting to let Oscar loose and play guitar, and because it's like I don't know how often he gets to do that on other gigs, and to just and I feel like that about everybody in my band and everybody who's on the record. I love like just getting to let them do their thing and have that be a part of my thing. It's really an honor, and it's and I just I like it because I like it. I want to hear them do that. And if anybody else likes it, that's great. But I don't really care. I'm just having fun myself, you
Yeah,
know?
you're really giving back. It's making you feel good that you're giving the gift of music and letting people just branch out, like, do your thing,
Absolutely. Yeah, man.
unbridled
Yeah.
creativity.
Yeah.
Love it. What's the best advice you would give a young talented musician who wants to break into the scene and make a living playing music today in 2024?
I think I would say for me, this whole thing is about community. It's about other people. So learn how to play with other people, find joy in playing with other people, play in a way that other people like to play with you. I think there's a lot of, I think like social media sort of encourages solo performance. And the way that people play by themselves is not the way that people play in a group.
Right.
And I think that it's much more rewarding and in a deeper way to make music with other people. And so learn how to do that and find the people who make you feel inspired. Get around the people who you want to be around, you know, and then don't even worry about the gigs or whatever. Just start hanging out with musicians, you know, go to see musicians who excite you and be around, and maybe they'll ask you to sit in one night, and maybe, you know, like that's it. It's really only worth pursuing the kind of stuff that you really want to do. So find the people who are doing that, whether it's in person or online or whatever. And, everything that's happened to me that's been good or exciting in my career is a result of following that, you know, making music with people I like and care about, love and care about, and making the music that really means something to me. That always leads to the best stuff.
Such great advice, really. You're such a gifted singer, and you have an appealing timbre that works perfectly for pop music.
Thank you.
Were you born with that tonality, or is it something that you had to develop?
Well, I think the sound of my voice is just the sound of my voice. I mean, I don't really try to do anything. I just try to sound as much like myself as I can, and try to.
And you do. Steve Salcedo gave you one of the best compliments when I was speaking with him. He said, "You know, Zach's such a great singer because he sings exactly the way he speaks."
That's really nice, and I'll take that. And that's always the goal for me. I want it to feel, I want it to feel honest, and I want it to feel like me. So, yeah, I've worked to make that easier and more consistent and do it better. But I do just want to sound like myself.
Yeah. Now, there were a couple of songs that you changed around in the set for the last Tricky Bits show.
Yeah.
And like you took out Shelter, you took out Kind and Comfortable, I believe. Were those decisions predicated on that you were playing guitar and you were the front man, and that these were certain songs that you couldn't sing so easily?
That's a good question. Guitar? No, it's more... Well, first of all, the first gig that you saw is the first time I've ever played drums on a Tricky Bits show.
I didn't know that.
And that was just to sort of try it out and see. I mean, I play drums on all the records, but normally I like to be up front. And we tried it that first night, and I realized, yes, I do like to be up front. I find it a lot easier to connect with the audience. Yeah. And I also just feel like then I can just focus on singing and performing, and it feels easier to me than having to kind of hold down the whole thing.
Yeah, it has to be much harder, you know, being behind the kit and trying to be a front man at the same time.
Yeah, like I don't have a hard time singing while I play drums, but I do have a hard time being a front man while I play drums, if that makes sense.
Because you're in the back.
Like, yeah, well, right. And you're kind of like walled off by gear. Right. So the set list change was more just about, I try to do that every time we play, because now I have enough songs in the catalog that I can do that. And I figured there would be people who would come, we'd have repeat customers, you know, and I want to give people a different show every time. Yeah. So that was great. That was mostly why. It was just kind of, let's switch it up, and we'll do the same thing at the next show. You know, there's a few songs I kind of always like to play, but for the most part, you know, I like to switch things around.
It worked. Yeah. It worked really well. Thanks. So what are your plans for Tricky Bits for the rest of 2024? Tour dates, recordings, anything?
Man, I'm gonna, one of my goals for the summer is to finally start writing some new tunes, do some recording.
Cool.
I need to get back in. Tour just kind of put all that to the side for me. It's hard for me to write and be creative in that way when I'm on the road. So I definitely want to make some new stuff, and we'll be back at the bitter end with Steven before the end of the year. We haven't announced it yet, but we'll be there again.
Awesome.
So I love to pay Steven a compliment. I love doing that co-bill together. I think it's such a great, it's such a nice night of music, and different enough, but similar enough that the show works well, and we can sit in with each other. And I think he's one of my favorite musicians, period. But I also just seeing him do that thing is like, I just feel like I'm seeing him do what he was born to do.
Right. It helped both acts because you're both benefiting from your following.
Totally.
And it makes the club owner happier. Yeah. Because he could bring in more people. He could sell more tickets when there's synergy between like two bands. Yep.
I really want that to become a thing, those two bands plus an opener. I really enjoy, and I enjoy pulling in different openers, like friends of ours. That's really fun. So yeah, but I just think that Latin Soul thing is like, it's so special, and it's just such a beautiful expression of Steven's person and musicianship, and I can't say enough. Like, it's really is my favorite thing in New York right now, and so I love getting to do those gigs with him. Also, just because then I get to watch the band play.
Yeah, that's really big of you.
My work's done, and I can hang out.
Yeah, and you do, and you really enjoy it. I could see, like when you're just hanging out. Yeah. You and Hannah, just hanging out, like being the biggest cheering fans out there.
Totally, man. Totally.
So awesome, man. I really tip my hat to you.
Thank you, dude.
Now, Coker's not part of that, is it? Like, Coker is not like...
No.
He's a separate thing.
Yeah, he's a separate thing. But now he's done two of those with us, so it's like it's the unofficial after party or something. He's a good dude. He's a nice guy.
He is. And you sat in with him. It was great.
I did. That was fun. Yeah.
What gave you the idea to sing You Can't Do That in Salcedo's gig?
That was Steven's idea. He
said it was your idea.
He did?
Yeah.
That's funny.
Maybe he's just throwing me jive, man.
Well, he has a better memory than I do, so if he says that, then I'll believe him. But I just thought, I thought he said this would make a cool, like, boogaloo. But I'm glad that he wants me to sing it with him. We recorded it, so that'll come out probably sometime this year.
Yeah, and I think it's really cool that you get him up on Plastic Soul because he's on the record.
He is, and he did beautiful horn arrangements on the last song on the album. So I Don't Want to Say Goodbye. That's all him. I just said, write something, and he did, and it's totally gorgeous. And so he's very lucky to know that guy. That's for sure.
Absolutely, he's a big benefit. Forget it that he's a great guy, but he's just great to have in your stable of musicians.
Yeah,
because he has one of the best bands around.
He really does,
without a doubt. And then you have that juxtaposition of power pop and Latin soul. Yep. Which is awesome. It's so different from each other. It's all
rock and roll, in a way.
And it's all rock and roll at the same time.
Music.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to say to my viewers before we hit it and quit it, so to speak?
Dude, just thanks for having me, and thanks for the support. I'm glad you dig what we're doing. And
I really do.
Yeah, I would just say to your viewers, like, stay tuned. We're gonna do more shows. We're gonna make more records. We're gonna keep doing the thing. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, that's the easiest way to keep up with what I'm doing.
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah, records I'm producing, people I'm playing drums with as a sideman, and then my own stuff and whatever. So Zach Jones Music on Instagram.
Awesome. So you heard that, everyone. You can go to Zach Jones Music on Instagram. That's the best social media to reach Zach. And you can find tour dates, latest Tricky Bits info, and
That's
other
it.
session gigs that he may be doing with other cats
Whatever's
around
going on,
town?
I'll let you know on there.
Yeah. Zach, my brother, thank you so much. It was
Thank
such
you, dude.
a great pleasure to interview you
Thank you.
and to hang out. And, I'd love to get coffee sometime
Yeah, man. It
and
was great
continue
talking,
it.
great hanging.
Now that you might have a little more spare time not playing
Yeah.
with that English musician, as you called them before.
Yeah. Thanks, dude.
Fantastic. Thanks, man.
All right. Yeah. I'll see you.
All right.
Thank
Be
you.
well.
You too.
Talk to you later. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.